On behalf of the Raza Foundation and the India International Center, we welcome you this evening to yet another panel discussion under our running series, Art Matters. We had announced that we will discuss coping with chaos as the theme for this. Unfortunately, we could not gather enough speakers. So not only that there is now going to be a problem about the audience, there is also a problem about speakers. So we have to do some rethink, as they say. But be that as it may, so we decided to have art as celebration. Also because we have passed through very noisy, highly lighted celebration somewhat recently. So we thought it might be a good occasion to discuss art as celebration. In fact, in perhaps a few decades now, nobody thinks of art as celebration. Art is thought to be disruption, tension, dissension, all kinds of other things, interrogation, exploration. But that art also celebrates life or human condition or human relations or nature or love or whatever. That idea or that notion seemed to have, if not withered away, at least has become somewhat subterraneous. Another hiatus has appeared between, let's say, performing arts and the other arts, literature included. In performing arts, there is still the remnants of celebration. So it seems as if we have decided that the job of music and dance, particularly, and if you have the theatre of a Habib Tanveer or a Ratan Thiyam or a Panikka, they will also, in some sense, celebrate. But the others somehow are reluctant or reticent or unwilling to celebrate. Now, I was in, where was I? Cornell. And I was to give a talk, and I had called the talk, How Not to Approach Indian Art and Culture. You come out with this highly spiritual civilization and all this rubbish. So I wanted to give another viewpoint. And in one of the things that I said there, in the passing, was that the Indian modernity has retained this celebrative element in spite of everything. I mean, in spite of the fact that perhaps that is not so overtly emphasized or stated, but the Indian modernity retains an element of celebration. After the talk was over, we had a reception. And in the reception, a Nobel laureate in chemistry, who happened to be the audience, walked up to me. And he said, I understood today why I have not been able to find an American publisher of my English translations of Jaya Goswami's Bengali poetry. Now, in the first place, there was a Nobel laureate in chemistry, and he happened to go to Calcutta and lived there for a while, working something, and then he got involved in Bengali poetry. And he said, in the American poetry, the element of celebration has completely disappeared. So there are no publishing people who will be willing to take this kind of a book of poetry, because in Jaya Goswami's poetry, there is an element of celebration. The other episode, I'm just waiting so some more audience comes in. It's only keeping you engaged. And the other episode is that a lady with whom I had worked for a while on translating Polish poetry into Hindi decided to do her delete on my poetry. And I'm rather weary of academics, but she's a different academic, and there's some academics sitting here who are also bright and intelligent and innovative. And then she published the book. She worked for 3-4 years, and she published the book in Polish, which is a bit of a tome, a 500-600 pages book, and it's called A Treatise on the Art of Celebration. So she had decided in her analysis of my poetry that the element of celebration is rather strong. When some of my detractors who have enough material to condemn me for, when they don't find anything else, they say, this man is Utsav Dharmi. He converts everything into a celebration. In fact, once I was prevented, almost prevented in my absence. Of course, I was not there, but we had a condolence meeting for Prabhash Joshi, who had died. No. It was Ramu Gandhi's condolence meeting. And Ramu, apart from being a good friend, but anyway, so when my name came up, it was Prabhash Joshi who said, अरे उनको मत बुलाइए क्योंकि वो तो हर चीज को सेलिब्रेट करते हैं तो वो anyway, so in other words, the act of celebration is a bit undercloud in a certain sense. But if you look in the long tradition of Indian aesthetics and Indian poetics and what you have a very strong element of celebration. He who did not celebrate at one time would not be considered to be worthy of the art which he might have or she might have chosen for her expression. So with these few remarks, we had to have 4, but anyway we'll make do with 3, just as we are make do with few in the audience. Rajinder Nath, the theatre man, not able to join us. He's not keeping well or something. Then we have 3 persons belonging to 3 distinct areas. We have LEELA ji, who has been involved with classical music and classical dance, and particularly dance for a long while, and she has been a very eminent critic of the classical dance. We have KEKI DARUWALA, who is one of the most important poets of India today, and perhaps one of the most important poets English language has produced in India, and it has not produced many of that stature. So KEKI DARUWALA, he also writes fiction. And then we have RAJEEV LOCHAN, who is a painter, has been a teacher of art, and at the moment heads the National Gallery of Modern Art. So we have visual arts, we have poetry and literature, and we have performing arts. Theatre is missing, but hopefully somebody would chip in with some remarks to complete the picture. Now the rules of the game are simple. Each one of you gets 15 minutes to have your say, and after those 15 minutes are over, then if you have to say something to each other, you're allowed that opportunity. And if you don't want to avail of it, then we throw it open to the house. The game in the house is that you can ask a clarification or give a brief comment or something. But you are not supposed to give another lecture or talk, because we already have these, and having suffered them or enjoyed them for 45 minutes, nobody is willing to prepare to have another talk or lecture. So these are simple of the games, the rules of the game. May I ask with KEKI DARUWALA? Oh, I keep on forgetting these flowers every time. Anyway.
Thank you, sir.
Also give a little honorarium. We've not revealed the amount. So, KEKI, would you like to speak from there?
No, I'd rather speak there. Uncomfortable speaking from. The distinguished members on the dais, Shri Ashok Vajpayee, thank you for calling me at all. Art and I don't really gel, nor do I gel with music, though I do agree with you that yes, the entertaining the performing arts do entertain. They are meant to entertain, whether it's, of course, classical dance is different, classical music is different, but otherwise, drama, all the performing arts are meant to, in a way, celebrate and entertain. As an aside, I'll say, because the point was raised that now things are different in poetry and literature. Incidentally, I was asked to speak on poetry, but I'll speak a little on art, the little I know. We had a professor, he'd returned, well, he was from Oxford, Professor S.S. Chabla, our best English teacher from where I come. And he used to always start his talks on Chaucer and all the rest, and he had the accent, one that aprile with his shawls sauté, the truth of Mars said, press it to the rote. But that was celebratory. And now T.S. Eliot changed it totally. April is the cruelest month, bringing lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire. Dead land, the cruelest month. The seasons or the ages have turned a page, and but I'll come to that later. To start with, very simplistically, I would say that whether it's art or literature or poetry, I mean, you can slot them into three pigeonholes: mirror to life, an escape from life and reality, and celebration of life. So why can't we celebrate what art and literature are all about, what life on the planet is all about, life as we live it, imagine it, dream it? Why shouldn't we take it also as a celebration? But celebration is just a part, nothing beyond. I mean, prehistoric man, he started painting on caves, and he painted his trees, he painted his stags, his deer. I have seen a red bull on the caves in Spain, beautifully painted, absolutely red, and immaculately painted, which is supposed to be 30,000 years ago. So there you are. You have a man, and it denotes kinship with animal life, with wildlife, with trees and plants, with vegetation. And from that arose the vegetation myths, Greek Persephone and Kore and all the rest. The vegetation myths were harvesting and death and the usual thing. People, the plants growing up, the goddesses coming up, and we had a number of goddesses all dealing with vegetation, and the cycle of seasons rose with it. Vegetation and the underworld myths, vegetation myths and the underworld myths got mixed up, whether it was in Greece or in Mesopotamia and other places. So there it was. Orpheus and Eurydice, why not? And so you have song as well. Song is a important part. So whether it is literature or in art, there are no stalemates of feeling. If there is a stalemate, then there is no art, you can't have poetry, of course. It becomes extremely difficult. So you have to go beyond that. You have to reach beyond that, and once you try reaching beyond it, it becomes a celebration in its own way. I was brought up in Western Maury's, including Western art, we had books on Raphael and Botticelli and all the rest. And what were they? They were a celebration of beauty. Raphael, I mean, whether it's rhythm, I remember in the 40s, on Christmas Day, there was the cover of the Illustrated Weekly of India, Madonna and the Christ by Raphael. Absolutely beautiful Madonna, feet bare, a blue, sky blue sort of cover, on the head, and the child with her. And Raphael had beauty in rhythm, beauty in form, space composition, all that came with him. Of course, he was derided as well. Raphael was derided by Michelangelo and Leonardo both. Michael one day, and he had a huge following, while Michelangelo and the others didn't. Michelangelo was the man for masculine beauty, not Raphael. And as he saw Raphael coming, he said, "Oh, so you are walking like a sheriff with his posse behind him." And I believe Raphael retorted and is saying that you are walking like an executioner to the scaffold. I thought executioner to the scaffold, it may have been as if you were being executed and were being taken to the scaffold. With Botticelli, I mean, The Birth of Venus, it's an amazing painting. The same goes with Spring. Birth of Venus, you have the two, Zephyrus and Zephyraitis on the left, and she is coming out of that huge coral, whatever you call it. Similarly, Spring and they were careful about faith, hope, and charity are all on the left, and I don't know who the two figures are on the right. And the thing about Botticelli was that always, or near always, he would have a window, and through the window, the lovely Italian landscape could be seen, except a few of them. There is this Madonna and the pomegranate, where the Madonna is just looking straight as if into distance. So distance comes through, but only through the looks of the lady. And religion had a very big part in all art. They stuck to the Pietà. They stuck to the Calvary, Christ dragging the cross and shown in a terrible way, or Christ actually on the cross with Barabbas and the others. So there you were. You had, and all the motifs were there, and of course the adoration of the Magi. And who were the Magi? The Zoroastrians who went from Persia, though they never had names like Balthazar and Gaspar and Melchior. Well, Gaspar must have been Gustache or something, and Melchior could have been Minocher or something. You never know. There couldn't have been a Daruwala anyway. But so there you were, and Milton. If you change over to poetry, see how far from on the eastern road the star-led wizards haste with odors sweet. There you are, and Milton, you know what he did. That was the time, that was an age, and the Renaissance was one of the greatest ages art or possibly even literature have ever witnessed as far as Europe is concerned. The other thing I wish to say here is that the other thing they brought into painting was they started painting emotion. And that was extremely necessary. So it was not just the execution, not just the paints that they had, it was also the emotion coming through. I mean, we have all our Tankas, and we have Ellora and Ajanta and the tremendous paintings there. The other thing, but I don't know how much of emotion comes through with some of the old this. And the other thing was the reverence for human life that came through, and painting emotion came through. Poetry has always celebrated Forget poetry. Then you come to the later ages, and the 19th century. I think it started with Baudelaire and the others. They changed everything. I mean, I still remember Picasso saying that I could paint like Raphael at the age of 9. Now that is nonsense, I'm sure. Very arrogant. As also speaks of the modern arrogance. I'm sure no 16th or 17th or 15th century painter from Europe would have mentioned a thing like that I can paint like so and so when I was 9. But what he was trying to say is that anyone can paint a beautiful woman or a beautiful man or a tremendous landscape, and they believed in this psychological fragmentation and the fragmentation which despair brought about in our lives, the dislocation, the schizophrenia that came in with science and modernization, and we are stumped with that. And Ezra Pound's the famous poem, the Selwyn Mobile, where he says the age demanded a grimace, the age demanded an image of its accelerated grimace, something for the modern stage, not in any case, at any rate, an attic grace. And he said for 3 years, out of tune with his time, he strove to resuscitate a dead art of poetry, to maintain the sublime in the old sense, wrong from the start. One has to bring in poetry and literature because, as people have said, as Susan Langer has said, that if you didn't have the words to objectify what you feel, to objectify the thought, then it would be just a flow of sense impressions, and those sense impressions would be extremely subjective. It is words that turn it into a thing, into an object, into facts. So literature with its words and art, painting, architecture, all the rest, they eventually merge. And the celebration was there right from the beginning. The pastoral, I take even As You Like It as a pastoral, how would you have a pastoral of or a bucolic this in drama form? So the pastorals were, and the Greeks had it, the Romans had it. There's this famous poem on the Lament for Bion. It's supposed to be one of the famous poems, and when you read it today, it is by Moschus, though the classical dictionary my father left me pronounces him as Moscus, Moskas. Ye mountains, valleys, pitifully grown, rivers and Dorian springs for Bion weep. Ye plants drop tears, ye gales lamenting moan. Exhale your life, wan flowers, your blushes deep. In grief, anemones steep. The sad, sad woe thy lettered petals keep. For Bion sings no more his friends among. With Bion fell the song, the music of the Dorian shell. And he goes on like that. It's a huge, long lament. So the elegies, but even the elegies were in a way celebratory. You are celebrating, when a big writer dies or a big painter dies, we say we are not here to mourn him, we are here to celebrate his performance, celebrate what he did for all of us. Similarly, I would say these are celebratory of that kind of a thing. If you take Rembrandt, it was a celebration of light and shadow, and how magnificently he did it, and the entire painting in all the Amsterdam galleries and everywhere, it is dark, you see, and just the face glows, though even the black that they are wearing has a lustrous strain about it. It is lustrous, it is not very, very drab, not the kind I am wearing, if one may say so. So, and we had our old poets on the cycle of seasons. I mean, there are hundreds of Sanskrit poems. Abhinanda, Yogeshwara, all these people wrote. Kalidas wrote the Ode to Autumn. If you permit, I have the translation. I can recite the translation. The autumn comes, a maiden fair, in slenderness and grace, with nodding rice stems in her hair and lilies in her face. In flowers of grasses she is clad, and as she moves along, birds greet her with their cooing glad, like bracelets tinkling song. A diadem adorns the night of multitudinous stars. Her silken robe is white moonlight, set free from ivory bars. And on her face the radiant moon, bewitching smiles are shown. She seems a slender maid who soon will be a woman grown. And it goes on. There's another stanza. I don't recollect it too well. So there you are. They celebrated autumn. Keith celebrated autumn, and everyone did. They celebrated the seasons, the poets, writers, and the disease which came with the symbolists and with Baudelaire. And the age changed, you see, the rhythms became syncopated, the artists stuck to cubism and, dividing things into squares and cubes. Again, fragmentation, psychological fragmentation of the world around them, the environment around them, the zeitgeist around them. That is how we... And then, of course, T.S. Eliot, and as far as English is concerned, they brought it down. But now there's a reaction. There's a totally post-Eliotesque age, which is, there are numerous landscape poets in America. You can't open a literary magazine without finding a poem talking about trees, animals, flowers, and all the rest. So, just as you had the classicism and then romanticism, similarly, you have this. I can also say that literature, when Homer talks of the Odyssey, or especially the Iliad, we have our Mahabharata, and they are a celebration in a way of also of war, also of 100 values, the values which an entire society has, an entire country has, an entire nation should be having. But they are also talking about celebrating war. My tragedy was that I went to Homer through Pope, Alexander Pope. That's the book we had. I still have it. And as Oscar Wilde said, there are two ways to dislike poetry. One, you just dislike it. And the second is to read Pope. So I don't think I have much more to say, but the celebratory aspect, or the celebratory dimension of all art should not be really forgotten, and we should not go into total pessimism as so many of our great authors, including the ones in prose, you see. And from Proust and Joyce and all, which are sometimes to the ordinary man become almost unreadable. So let's celebrate art and be happy. Thank you.
Thank you.
LEELA,
You upload it?
Yeah,
All this extremely immature.
my happens me being close to all of
Talking about the same
Mr. Ashok Vajpayee, distinguished panelists, friends. I think all of us are looking at this word celebration in different ways. For me as a child, the arts were always celebratory. There's no question. Whether they were decorative arts, whether they were visual arts, whether they were performing arts. And somehow I felt that everything I saw by way of art included the sacred, including the ritualistic, also included the celebratory. That is something I took for granted. But now very often I feel that I'm living in two time zones, and there is a confusion of content and context. In some areas I feel the arts as celebration are wonderful. But there are certain other contexts where I feel the arts as celebration just will not work and has not worked. I want to recapture a few of the images of my childhood, if it doesn't make some of you feel very cynical about it. I remember as a child of 4 in Bangalore, we lived opposite a small temple of Ganesh on top of a hillock. It was a very unpretentious looking temple. But every time there was a celebration, it was music, it was dance of the richest classical type. There was music, some of the greatest classical musicians came there to sing, and there were all kinds of decorations. And whenever I went there, I felt this is what arts are meant to be. I still remember during Ganesha Habba, as they used to call it, 1 week before Ganesh Chaturthi, they would start decorating the idol of Ganesh. And it was extraordinary, the kind of handwork that went into it. They would just take coconut shavings and decorate the whole idol from head to toe. Sometimes it would be just the kernel of oranges, and you found the god made out of something that was absolutely orange. Sometimes it would be the pomegranate seed with the lights shining on top of it, and I felt here is a beautiful idol. I mean, made entirely of rubies. How wonderful. Now there's a lot of art which went into all this, mind you. And then the flower making, it was really a work of art. I have not seen anything like it in the last 20 years. Now even today, if you go to the Kabalishwara temple in Chennai, and you see some of the flower work that is done there, it is absolutely extraordinary. The garlands they make, it's not the unimaginative way of taking a needle and thread and putting it through these stems and making garlands. No, they make a fine thread out of the bark of the plantain tree, and then they have 8 of them together, and they literally put the flower like this and they weave. It's a tapestry that is made. It's like a handloom, handloom piece of cloth being made. It is something extraordinary to see. Now that is a work of art. Now unless you associate it with a celebration, I don't know what meaning these art forms have. Take the Nadaswaram. The best of classical music is in the pipe music of the Nadaswaram. The Nadaswaram means celebration. For every celebration, we have to have the Nadaswaram. As a matter of fact, the minute you hear the Nadaswaram, you know there is a celebration on. Whether it's a wedding, whether it's an unjal in the temple, or whether it is some great thing happening in the temple where the idols are being taken on a procession. And mind you, it is the best of music. Now lots of people have tried to make concert recitals of Nadaswaram, and somehow it has not succeeded. People don't come to listen to the Nadaswaram. It has to be for a celebration. That is when you go to listen to Nadaswaram. Otherwise the Nadaswaram somehow doesn't seem the same to you. Now, in Kapalishwara temple, I don't know how many of you have been to Chennai in a part of December, when there is a big Rangoli competition that is on. And right in front of the temple, the entire black-topped road is filled with these beautiful drawings. I mean, they are great works of art made with just rice powder or rice that is ground. The most beautiful paintings. And there is a competition, and there is a huge crowd. It's an absolute celebration. You have to watch that to see what art, what handiwork people are capable of, you know. Now all this is associated with celebrations. And you go even today to the temple and people will talk to you about Doraikannu's dance about 60 years back. Doraikannu was the mother of Gauri Amma, the Devadasi, who was later on taken by Rukmini Devi to teach in Kalakshetra. Now she was very great at Abhinaya. And I believe her mother was extraordinary at it. And old people who've seen Doraikanu say, you know, that art form, I don't think we are ever going to be able to see again. Any important event connected with the Shaivite myth, Doraikanu had to be there in her white robes, and the kind of evocative abhinaya that she came out with, taking some of the best of Shaivite poetry, we haven't seen that again. It's completely disappeared. Now, during our South Indian marriages, we used to have what is called a kitukote, that is made out of just thatch and bamboo. These wonderful enclosures, so absolutely artistic, where the marriage used to take place. And today you have these ugly concrete buildings, one side for the girls' side, one side for the boys' side, and a built-in vedi where everybody sits down and conducts the ceremonies, and the entire romance of that has gone. All those artists have totally disappeared. Now, in the 1920s and 30s, when there was a complete relocation of the arts, and you took them away from these surroundings, and you brought them to an entirely different space, which was structured differently for industrialized modernization, then I think there was the dilemma of adjustment. And I don't think the classical performing arts in particular have really got over this dilemma completely, even today. Because a context is different, but the content remains the same. And you don't know what to do. And yet you want to make a celebration of it every time. That entity that we had, which was architectured on certain metaphysical principles, contained a space where the social, cultural, religious life of the community and the artistic manifestations took place. It had some meaning for the people. That has ceased to exist. Now, what do we do with these art forms when they bring them onto a completely different proscenium theatre, and you say, you're going to present the same thing but to cosmopolitan audiences, but still it has to be a celebration? I don't think it's the same. That quietude, the silence, what makes those art forms really great, all that has disappeared. Just the other day, Munna Shukla, the great Kathak guru, was talking about Kathak. And he came out with certain compositions which were exquisite. All of us were watching it and we said, we don't see this kind of thing today. He said, gaps are very important in Kathak. By gaps, I mean silences. Unless you have the silences, your articulated points will have no meaning. Because one gives meaning to the other. One draws meaning from the other. If the other does not exist, then this also has no meaning. He says, आजकल पता नहीं दौड़ रहे हैं, पता नहीं कहाँ जा रहे हैं. But everybody wants to run, and it's a great celebration. सब लोग नाच रहे हैं, सब लोग नाच रहे हैं, सभी जगह celebration हो रहा. लेकिन क्या कर रहे हैं ये लोग? And then he came out with a sentence in English, probably written by an English author, which he reproduced. He said, if you don't understand my silences, you will not understand my words and language. And I think that has happened to a lot of our art forms. Everything is a celebration. We wanted to mark 1,000 years of the great temple of Tanjavur. We had 1,000 dancers doing Bharatanatyam simultaneously. What are you going to show? 1,000 dancers doing Bharatanatyam simultaneously? I mean, it was complete chaos. Similarly, in Kuchipudi, you had 500 dancers in Hyderabad dancing together. There was the International Odissi Conference in Orissa, and in the main stadium, in the open, on the lawns where sports take place, we had 500 dancers doing Odissi. Now this kind of thing that we are doing today, where the gloss, the glamour, everything you see, it's no longer the content, but the form which matters. And the entire thing is catering to a cosmopolitan population who certainly do not understand what our art forms are all about. But you want it to be a celebration. It has to be a celebration. And The other day when I went to Manipur, there was a Manipuri guru who was talking to me about some of Nata Sankirtan. He says, Nata Sankirtan is the main lifeline for Manipuri. If Nata Sankirtan goes, there is no Manipuri. Now we do it for all celebratory occasions in the life of an individual. When a child is born, when the ear is pierced, when you have a thread ceremony, when there's a death in the house, when there's a marriage in the house, Nat Sankirtan is always done. But he says today you are creating these abridged, cosmetic versions as a celebration for cosmopolitan audiences. These are being presented everywhere. And all the inside of the art form is suffering so badly. In-depth appreciation of the art form is no longer there. And we don't know what is going to happen to Manipuri if this continues. This is happening in all the art forms. Kathak is without its tat, which I think is its most significant part. I mean, you can't make a celebration of it. It is so quiet. It is so inward looking. It has to be in an intimate audience. Now, all these things are disappearing. The other day at the IIC, there was a wonderful program on Drupad. And it was also I think it was very contemporary in what it was trying to do. And yet it was using one of our oldest forms. And this was done by people who are not professional Drupadiya singers, but they were people who've been trained in Drupad music, and all of them happened to belong to an amateur organization in Bangalore. And youngsters from the age of 10 to 12 to really old people of 60, 65, all of them joined together. And what they did was they took the entire story of the Kathopanishad, the verses of the Kathopanishad, which was sung in the Drupad form. The Gundecha brothers had done the composition for this. And the entire story of Nachiketa and Yamaraja talking to each other about life and death. I mean, very philosophical, very metaphysical. That was a kind of a theatre thing which was built and woven around this main thing which was all Drupad centered. And you also had a Sutradhar who was tying up the loose ends. I think it is one of the most extraordinary performances I ever saw. And I said, well, this is what our arts need. These intimate spaces where you take the richness of our arts, but you show them in a way where they really mean something to the people. Don't try to make a celebration every time and ruin what these art forms are supposed to be. Now I will, sometimes you get the feeling that all the time, like Rabindranath's play, Chitrangada, where she tried to get this false veneer of glamour and beauty so that she could win the love of Arjuna, who didn't have the intelligence to appreciate the inner beauty of this great princess. I think today we are creating a lot of Chitrangadas through celebration. So I think we need something quieter. Everything doesn't have to be a celebration. You can go inwards. You can think of what is happening to the art form. You can be introspective. And I think if you bring back the silences, if you bring back the quieter moments to your art form, then you'll be doing it a great service. I recently got this beautiful article sent to me called Madhuvanti in Manhattan. I won't read the whole of it, I'll just read a few lines here and there. He first gives a description of New York, and then he says, into this inferno of pigeon-shit, poets, gay sex clubs, artists, transvestites, cab drivers, bond traders, and million-dollar construction sites, between August 19th and 25th, arrived a week-long celebration of Indian dance and music called Drive East. There, above rumbling subway trucks and surrounded by late-night party-goers, in a cozy performance space came to life Madhuvanti and Riti Gaula, Vibhas and Jaunpuri, Charukeshi and Mohanam. It was a week of dance and song, nervousness and exaltation. It was an effort to make Indian dance and music cool Yet, nearly 100 years after the first notch, Indian arts are struggling to register their presence in mainstream America. And then he says, but to play the role effectively in Indian arts, not only must the artist engage with self-awareness, he must also develop the tools and stratagems to do this. Many, however, and perhaps predictably, are defeated by the wide-ranging cognitive dissonances between the artist and the American audience, and retreat into the secure environs of fellow Indians. Then much later he says, yet at the heart of all tradition, over time lies extrapolation and expedience. The tricks of the trade alternate between reductionism and exaggeration in search of that agreeable middling ground. Classical Indian arts in America are no different. Some play up the exotica to arrive at a perceived authentic Indianness. Some others strip away the accoutrement to get to the metaphysical core of Indian art. And then he says, so the more engaged with the larger American audience, dance performances, the more we have texts, voiceovers, setting the stage, question and answer sessions. The consequence of all this was clear. Productions marked by an anxiety to contextualize and communicate. And then much later he says, the last paragraph as a matter of fact, many of them, their children, no. None of this, the organization of this successful festival program, indicates that the challenges of Indian dance and music in America are likely to be met. Part of this is because the arts emerge as responses to historic and social conditions. This second generation of Indo-Americans are happy to abandon the metaphysics and religiosity that informs much of Indian arts and adopt an agnostic utilitarian view. They, like many in India, may notice little truth or emotional resonance with the actual content of their compositions, Tyagaraja or Muthuswami Dikshitar. And then finally he says, but much of Indian arts have little to do with thoughts, ideas and institutions that emerged via the thought programs of Voltaire, Kant or Thomas Jefferson. Instead, much of classical Indian art is an effort to translate our mythological and deep intuitions of an ancient self into comprehensible units. This poses unique challenges. Teyyam, at its acme, is the revelation of the Kerala government does as a prop, our religious institutions that is beyond reason. To reduce it to a 30-minute dance for the tourists, as the Kerala government does, or as a prop in a book launch, as William Dalrymple does, is to translate this great art and complex tradition into something else, a witless participant in the global capitalist political economy. Or worse, a dumb prop in a narrative, no different than a chair, table, or capital political economy. The consequent meaning of this performance of Teyyams is hard to fathom. What is all the celebration about? To graft historical meaning of these great art forms into these accepted capsules smacks of cynicism and, well, lack of respect for the integrity of these dance forms.
राजीव लोचन
उधर ही जाएंगे।
Ashok ji, Leela ji, Mr. Daruwala,
friends. Well, we've actually traversed a very wide course and truly looked at the concept of celebration, its various facets, from truly what it is meant to be celebratory in the positive, negative sense of the term, from the point of view of poetics, writing, performance, at the same time the inner celebratory. I think that's what you were referring to, the concept of the inner silence, which is silent, in the worldly sense truly inactive, but yet the most active. Perhaps the same applies to a work of art, which remains on the surface, but activates, agitates, and celebrates on various levels. On levels which are experiential, on levels which transcend beyond, I'm sorry, on commenting on the word, on the, sorry to use the word, on the limitations of the word, and go beyond them in the most experiential fashion. I have a kind of a written text which I thought I would follow, and which I'm not following, but I'll go interject and also make some references to what my senior colleagues have also made. In fact, I don't know where to begin. You left at Marcel Proust, and I'll start with Marcel Proust. Marcel Proust, Daruwala Sahib left at. Marcel Proust said, I quote, "Each one of us is similar and dissimilar to each one of us, as many as there are eyes and minds that awaken every morning." Unquote. The role of a creator. I think I'm referring to the concept of the creation, which I truly believe that each one of us can create and has the capacity to create, irrespective of the languages that we use, whether formal or trained or any other. The role of a creator is to provide an image to it, because our observations are not mere passive records. They could refer to the silences that you referred to. They could refer to the boiling inner agitation that our sensibilities and senses imbibe through all what happens in the world which you just described. And that has actually motivated me from transgressing from what I have actually. Going back to the aesthetical concept, which I actually wanted to start with, Swanta Sukhai. Truly, what you can celebrate what you truly enjoy from inside. In Sanskrit means joy for self within. I think by doing this, we give you genuine happiness. The problem to my mind is we are interpreting the concept of celebration for others, not for ourselves. Celebration truly begins at home, in your own inner minds. You create truly for ourselves, and today, in my discipline, the visual discipline, the celebration of an exhibition depends on how much you sold. How many people arrive? Unfortunately not. That's not what.
Same with books.
Yeah, that's not what it is meant to be. Or also the page 3. Images that give you tales of who came. No, that is not what we are all talking about. I think that's what I wanted to, Swanta Sukhai, the inner joy, peace. And I'm reminded of this wonderful quote from Salvador Dali, very lucidly said, "Art is what flows from the mind through the tip of the brush onto the canvas," unquote. And love is the same thing. What a contrast. And what a beautiful amalgamation. In fact, I want to make this comment on, you raised the question of the prehistoric art, the Lascaux caves that you were talking about. A time when we do not know whether language had actually evolved or not. But in the absence of the word, the spoken or the written, evolved language, the visual, which had the capacity and which always will have the capacity to go down to those recesses of your existence which are not accessible to common logic and are accessible to instinct and intuition. This prehistoric man who wanted to communicate to his fellow beings for his quest for survival, not to be an artist alone, except the fact that because it came so genuinely and purely that these are wonderful works of art. Also in the case of Bhimbetka, that the terrain that you are living in is hostile. Fabulous words. The animals that you need to survive on are not only several times your size but extremely agile. But let me tell you, if you manage to kill them using the susceptible spots which are either the forehead or this, you shall have a ball, a celebration for the next. And that's the precise reason why you not only see that agility, you see the sense of celebration in the group of men or warriors, whatever you would call it. I mean, that's the point that I'm trying to make. In fact, coming down to Picasso, that Daruwala Sahib, I'm not trying to contradict, I'm just trying to extend.
Please go ahead.
Picasso, in fact, there was this story, is a very beautiful story. I'll read the text later, it's not important. It was Sir Herbert Reed who wanted to mount the first exhibition of child art, folk art, because these were forms of art which were considered to be redundant, which had nothing truly to contribute to the concept of modernity the way it had evolved. Not realizing that yes, truly, the child's mind is so fresh that that's where the true seeds of modernity are sown. We called some of the best artists, some of the best thinkers to come and see this exhibition, and came Picasso. And he did not even notice the presence of Sir Herbert Reed, and he was so involved in looking at these works of child art. And Sir Herbert Reed nudged him and asked him, what do you think of them? That's where he said, I could paint like Raphael when I was a child, but it took me a whole lifetime to paint like them. It's this celebration of the true freedom of expression that the preconceived mind had the freedom to exercise. I think, in fact, I'm coming from the modern school where I'd gone to, inaugurate an exhibition, and I was softly trying to tell the management that education, it's wonderful, but I think sometimes we educate too much, killing the real, true energy that child, and only that child, has embedded in him. Probably something we need to do, especially in the context of the art forms, to be able to ensure that this is able to flower, blossom, so that he's able to celebrate for the rest of his life. Because this word celebration was on my mind. The visual arts are necessary to push boundaries, encourage new ways of thinking, to celebrate or lament, lamentation, or human condition. Lamentation is also a kind of celebration. Yes, exactly what you said. So I immediately nudged and said, I'm going to talk. Celebration. The visual arts matter because they are about resistance, celebration, and transformation. Art matters because it is seen not as an extra, but an extension of our sentient and the mindful being. As a non-verbal mode of communication, something that I had referred to earlier. It's only this non-verbal mode that has the capacity to transcend beyond physicalities. The visual arts, distinct from the verbal and literary arts, can carry their potential mainly through perceptual means, which without resort to dictionaries and formalized grammar. Both the viewer and the artist as creator. In fact, that's exactly what you were referring to. Without the grammar. This is a grammar that evolves on its own, that is pushed by its own needs, rather than, and it's for a personalized purpose, for an inner purpose rather than. Whereas the artist as creator has the mental and physical task of arranging the parts that make up a whole. Example, a painting which becomes an offering to the prospective viewers. The viewer has the task of perceiving the relationship between the parts that make up the whole. For him or her, it is a process of mind, and thus it is an intellectual activity and a way of celebrating his creation and finding realization. I mean, I'm trying to link up both the spiritual that we ingenuinely this country has to offer and trying to imbibe that to the Western concept. Art is a cultural product intended and experienced by humans in a particular time and space. In fact, we have referred to that, how that space, that time, that context is continuously evolving, and we are trying to reflect upon it. It can serve many goals and purposes, but is subject to redefinition over time. This is a necessary presupposition in order to understand the history, philosophy, criticism, and production of art. In the struggle, an inevitable characterizes creativity, which may sometimes seem a purposeful endeavor, is in fact the only thing that matters. Because I'm an artist, art matters. But art matters more through being everything that is not anything else. In determining why art matters, be sure to look carefully around you. I think that's what something that every artist or creator needs to look at or looks at. Art in the beginning and the end of the human expression. It is a fundamental manifestation of the soul, a story told, everyone's own story, his inner story, his personalized story.
While one listens to music at a concert, it is the sheer joy of the experience, of the harmony of the symphony created, which we may not hear in nature. They are in combination of a variety of sounds. Such is the nature of art. An artist or a painter transports the viewer into a world of sensation created by the juxtaposition of color and harmony, etc., etc. To enjoy this emotive quality of art, one must leave behind the knowledge of the period, ideas, and allows the work to transport us from the world we know to the world of aesthetical exaltation. Only then shall we understand the true nature and the spirit of art and the sense of celebration behind it. I have a very interesting story to tell, which if I get an opportunity, I'll share later in the course of the conversation. Thank you.
Well, would you, between yourself, would you like to comment on each other or ask each other?
I don't wish to comment, but I wanted to make a point. 2 points. In harmony, as there is equal beauty in harmony as there is in dissonance. And that is what the last century and a half, sort of followed. And the historic reasons were very clear. I mean, the loss of faith in the divine, which came with science and with 100 other things. And I mean, surely you can't have adoration of the Magi or, scenes of Calvary and all in European art I'm talking about. But even in our own art, I mean, Ravi Verma was so brutally attacked for what other painters is calendar art, you see. So this there is the other point as well, that there were historic reasons why all this happened. And the third point I'd like to make, which I should have, is about this so-called social commitment, where artists are, the genuine artist, will not sacrifice his art for, social preaching, as Camus said. He said, I'll never sacrifice my art. Whatever he talked about, whatever he wrote, existentialism and etc. But he said, I won't sacrifice it to some social preaching. And art is, art and writing are different. And
he said we must simultaneously serve suffering and beauty. This does not mean that we must sacrifice our artist nature to some social preaching or other. And you have Solzhenitsyn and so many others, Milosh, of a favorite with Mr. Ashok Vajpayee, and Milosh will say just the opposite. I thought I'd leave these thoughts with you.
Would you like to tell the story?
Yes,
please.
Well, as it went on, because
Okay. And to the audience, if there is any comment or question. Yes? We'll give you a mic.
I think it's a very simple question.
No, the simple question also needs a mic. Because we are recording it. Go ahead.
To my worthy speakers here, how would you look at the modern art and the postmodernistic art, which of course reflects sordid realities and also split personalities of the modern age? And it is increasing day by day. This is my question to us.
Who will
I wouldn't like to answer that.
well, it'll take a whole evening to answer if we truly get into it. But nevertheless, I
Take
think
1
that-
minute to answer. Not the whole evening is not available.
I have another take on it. That it's interesting to note that both these words that you have just coined have perceptive and individualized experiences relevant to regions that they belong to and cannot be interpreted the way international definition has been so defined. And I'm very glad that Indian artists have been able to imbibe them and reinterpret them by, very beautifully churning it and, making them as part of their sensibility rather than pure emulation.
May I say something?
Yeah, please.
No, I think the subject matter, which forms the major part of this exposition, that it's ugly and dirty and horrible and there's dissonance and so forth, that in itself dictates a kind of dissonance in the formal aspect which is then produced. I don't think this is entirely true. And I give you an example here. You have in Eliot's Proof Rock, the poem, a description of the fog. This is very eloquent, and if I can remember it, I might go off the rails, but as far as I can remember, it says, the yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes. I'm only abbreviating it. The yellow fog that slides along the street, rubbing its back upon the window panes, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and saying that it was a soft October night, let fall upon his back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and saying that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. Now, you're talking about fog, what we have around us now, and it's a horrible thing. But on the other hand, what we are celebrating here is not the fog so much, but the poetic, the form which is being given in a particular context in this poem, I think. And I think that is what makes you tingle. I mean, the poetic, the poetics of it actually becomes very vibrant. It's not the subject matter of the fog per se, but whereas the common language which is now used to dispel a great deal of modern painting is it's ugly, it's this, it's that, and so on. But a lot of it is not ugly. I mean, Picasso's Guernica, for instance, is not an ugly painting, although it's a very apt rendering of a situation which happened in the early part of this last century. I could say more, but
Yes, yes. You take the
Karela neem chada. Karela neem chada necessarily doesn't mean that it is bitter.
Yes.
The celebration as a common activity of a large number of activity of a group celebration versus celebration of the individual. So even if a poetry, like you talked about the painting, it is celebrated by the beauty which makes it equally great, the celebration. So kind of internalizing the beauty and feeling it as an expression of the entire community, an entire human race, if not the community. So that relationship of art versus whole lot of people is, even in dance form, it's of particular importance.
If you go to the Thiruvayadu Aradhana today, you have thousands of people there congregated, all of them singing together. Normally you'd think the whole thing is absolute confusion. I mean, how can you have classical music like this? 1,000 people singing Tyagaraja Kirtan. But it is wonderful. It's an extraordinary experience. Because I think there is a sharing of some kind of a faith, because the entire performance, the singing, everything, I think ultimately becomes an article of faith. And they all come together with a worldview which they believe in. So when you have so many people who believe in the same thing, then I think there is some kind of an energy which is produced which is very special, which doesn't always happen. And I have seen M.S. Subbulakshmi. I mean, this is an experience that I don't like to talk about very often because a lot of people will think this is absolute nonsense. I heard her sing in the mutt when the old Shankaracharya, who's no more, was alive. And he was a shriveled up man of about 98, hardly able to move, and he came be sitting like that, all huddled up. And this happened to be Shivaratri, and she was singing in Panturali, Shiva 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 Yana Radha. And she had closed her eyes and she was not seeing the thousands of people who were seated, and there were tears coming down her eyes. And she was just singing, she was completely lost in the music. And then suddenly we found this old man who had been helped by everybody, and he was so feeble. Suddenly, he just got startled, he stood up, and he just stood absolutely rammed on straight. And he was looking at something, he was interacting with something, we don't know what it was. Maybe it was some kind of a part which had been evoked through her music, And he had the sensibility to be able to see whatever it was. The others didn't have that, you see. But then I was thinking, so many people sitting there. And I think ultimately this is what, great classical music is supposed to do, because it speaks to you deep inside and produces something which is very special. And the inner chord being touched when there is such a large gathering, it very rarely happens. But I think that is because like-minded people are meeting and it's happening. But today it's not like that. When you take the art on to places where you have cosmopolitan audiences who all sing differently, then I think what you present also has to be different, because anything that is bound by religion or faith or something is something that is, it doesn't evoke that kind of a response easily. And I think here, particularly in dance and music, there is a great deal of a confusion which takes place.
But don't you think that when the whole atmosphere is limited, it's a small background.
Oh, it's great, Which is why I said it's a question of context. You see, the content and context. It depends on that. But when you bring it to a different, space altogether, then.
It's like actually painting a mural, which is for everybody to participate in, and all the difference between that and a private statement, or a singular statement which is made. The quietness of your spirit is very different.
I have a very small question. The celebration of artists depend on time and space, or it depends upon the globally same everywhere? When say Michelangelo or Da Vinci or all these, they are popular in Europe in compared to India or Asia. Same our Kathak dance and other dance is much more popular in India. The time bound or space bound, or what is the impact?
No, he's asking whether art is space bound in some sense.
Yeah, universal or is
Or it
limited to
is-
some space?
I think it's always, when if you are talking of Indian classical dance and music, it is culture specific, there is no doubt about it. It is culture specific and it does apply to a certain ambience and
Yeah, the musical
But it's not
musical
done- it is
spirit
not
could
done-
be universal.
yeah,
The
could be.
musical
Yes,
spirit
absolutely.
could be universal, but it is culture bound and specific to regions. And if your lack of familiarity with that may forbid you to be
Yeah,
able
but
to
if you can make the initial penetration into that.
into it, then you can
all
get
the
through
way
it.
back.
Yeah, I'm sure you can. In some
Absolutely.
way, I mean, you may not be able to dot the I's and cross the T's, but I'm sure people who get tremendously, taken in by Indian music, they say that intellectually we didn't understand, but there's something there which.
इतना simple नहीं है आपका answer. This question is, today we are living in a globalized world. Why of all the art forms, भंगड़ा जिसको हम कुछ समझते नहीं थे पंजाबी का, वो तो सारी दुनिया में फैल रहा है. और जो this is a question. I'm asking you whether you are talking of the purity of art. He is talking here grounded it further. I'm a listener, I'm a teacher, and students ask me when I teach Gitanjali or art form of Tagore and crochet to them in a static paper, they ask me where is her pure form? ये प्योर फॉर्म ग्लोबलाइजेशन है, सबका भट्टा बिठा दिया. वो जो आर्ट को, हम है पंजाबी, I didn't know that why of all the art forms, कथाकली या चुनना हुआ ICCR ने, they will pick up what? They will pick up Bhangra because it is more known there or wanted there. So he is referring to that point that in this age of globalization, when money, economics and politics are entering into the whole field, then where does this art stand?
Yeah, but you know.
Popularization, I tell you why Bhangra is important. It's giving you the syncopated rhythms which are easy to dance to and be a social event. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the highest form of music.
Exactly.
It doesn't
हम
mean
तो उसको
that.
कथक दारू
I have no objection to anybody dancing and doing the Bhangra is great. उसकी भी जगह होती है. But there is also room for the other thing too, you know. I mean, one doesn't annihilate the other. They're not mutually exclusive.
भी आपको तीनों क्लासिकल डांस को प्योर फॉर्म कहते हो. मंगला तो उसमें आता ही नहीं क्लासिकल फॉर्म में. But still, due to the globalization effect, it is advancing. So this is a serious matter, not to be taken like this as you have taken.
No, I thought the question was on spatial matters like a dance, is it on the temple plinth, the space of the temple. I thought that was the question, but anyway.
Anyway. Anybody else? Yes.
So, what is art?
ऐसे सवाल ना
So
What
because
is art?
it's supposed to.
You're supposed to know.
Yeah.
You've come to this.
Yeah.
You're supposed to know
That's
what is
where
art.
I'm
We're not going to tell you.
I know. So
Okay.
that's where I get confused because it's supposed to invoke some harmonious feelings in you, or it has to be aesthetics and beauty, or grotesque can also be art. Because unless somebody tells us this is art, that's where we say yes, this is art. Because to some it might seem grotesque, and to some it might seem art.
हमारे रस है विभत्स, हमारे तो 9 रसों में विभत्स भी रस है. तो ये कोई नई बात तो है नहीं जो हम कर रहे हैं. विभत्स रस अगर थोड़ा प्रधान हो गया श्रृंगार के बजाय तो फिर भी रस है.
Okay, so the grotesque will also be considered as art?
Absolutely. Garbage can also be beautiful provided you have the specific glasses to be able to find the beauty in it.
But Vikram वाली आँख नहीं ना.
वो तो मैं कह रहा था मीटिंग
I must say that I greatly enjoyed the discussion that was going on. But there was this one particular question that was missing, and that is why I think something, as it gives us a feeling that something has remained to be articulated. I think celebration of art, for example, if you are taking European context, we are not talking about the globalized context at the moment. I think for a very long time,
the celebration was of human freedom, freedom of individual. That was the bottom line. And it was because of that for a very long time people thought that art is a way, one of the ways or spirit of art is to celebrate human values. But as you would know, that freedom itself could not remain attached to or defined by artistic expression. Freedom ultimately acquired a political notion. It was a political concept. And it began to be characterized even more specifically in terms of class. So for example, freedom could be also characterized as bourgeois freedom. And then you could have a lot of critics of this particular freedom, and to that extent art itself got defined in a certain way. So when my friend KEKI DARUWALA was talking about the commitment, social commitment, not art not really taking responsibility of social commitment for the sake of remaining autonomous and all that. It's still a bourgeois understanding of freedom that you were appealing to. But a great body of art realizes its value, and real celebration comes to it only when it shows that commitment to freedoms of other kinds. And it is very important that we should look at this whole notion of celebration politically also.
Yes, but that's a totally different, there's a different dimension to social, to commitment. I've written very long papers on committed poetry. I don't want to start that debate here because that's really outside the province of this particular evening.
No, but I mean, she's not asking for a debate now. What she's saying is that there are other dimensions to the
Similarly,
problem.
celebration is just one of the
I
aspects.
think references to those were made, but perhaps the elaboration that you had expected did not come about. But then, that's a matter of chance. I think everyone did refer to it in its subtle way.
And I was quoting Camus, I was not speaking myself.
Anyway, with that we come to the end of this evening, as well as here. And thank you very much for coming. Thank you all the panelists. On the 9th of December, we'll have another session. And that time it will be exploring abstraction. We are also hoping that the first issue, the inaugural issue of Arup, a journal devoted to visual arts, poetry and ideas will come out, which would feature articles by Mukund Lart, Charles Correa, people like that, and a substantial section on Gaitonde, and a long conversation with Krishan Khanna, etc. So that issue hopefully will come out, so we'll release that issue. And we have got the consent of Astad Debu and Atul Dodia so far to this panel. We'll have to add 2 more and we'll look for them. And hopefully by that time we will get someone. And so you are most welcome. And since all of you must have friends who are equally interested in these things and are intelligent, you must persuade them to come and take part in this. This is one of the rather poor audiences that we ever had today. I don't know why, because every time there are times that we run short of space and seats. But anyway, so do tell your other friends. Exploring abstraction on 9th December. Thank you.